Sydney Sweeney has been hella in the news lately. She did an interview with GQ that everyone is yammering about, and Claire took it to the next level, finally got to the bottom of what's Sydney Sweeney.
Well, I have to say, this has been long in the making because I feel like she's always in the news, making me go like, what is her deal and what is her angle? More than what is her deal, what is her
angle?
And I feel like it started this summer when she went to Jeff Bezos' wedding. And me and Ashley are both like, was she a hired actress for this wedding? Like, why is he friends with this giant bosomed 28-year-old? Like, what could she have in common with Jeff Bezos? Why would they be friends? I know that her movie, Anyone But You, was through Amazon Prime, I think.
Yeah, but lots of things are on Amazon Prime.
I mean, everybody in the world's on Amazon Prime. That's the problem. So that happened, and I was like, weird. And then she did her American Eagle jeans ad that everybody was like, what is wrong with you? And she refused to acknowledge it. And I was like, okay, crazy. And then she started dating Scooter Braun. And
when was the bathwater in all of this?
Oh my God, I forgot about this. So then there was like the bathwater thing. I think that was post Jeff Bezos.
So she did an ad for Sasquatch Man soap.
First, she did an ad where she's just sitting in the tub. And then the follow-up ad was like, if that wasn't sexy and for men enough, buy
my bathwater.
Which is, I don't think, true. I don't think you're allowed to sell somebody's bodily fluids in sanitary products.
Yeah, I also think that that's just so much bathwater to be selling. Like, how many baths
I think it was
this girl
Can I
taking?
say it was like a golden ticket situation, I think.
Oh, like only so many lucky winners can have the bathwater? Sasquatch in general, soap for men. Imagine being like, if you're a man and you're dirty, why not be this hill creature? The clean one.
I'm worried it's gay to be clean. No. It's monster-like. It's literally unknown. They claim to have seen a clean man once, but that's never been caught on camera. Sasquatch.
Buy this dirty water to go with your clean soap for boys.
She's had a lot of bombs, too, and I feel like that's important to know. Besides Anyone But You, which was a huge rom-com hit.
By virtue of it filling the category. I've said this once and I'll say it a million times. It's a fine movie to watch. It like does nothing interesting. The plot is obviously preposterous, but it doesn't come back around because of charm and excitement. It just is, and it is enough that people were so thirsty for a rom-com that like, I mean, I'm sorry, if I'd been wandering the desert for days and you said the only drop of water is Sydney Sweeney's bathwater, I would drink it. Like, people were so parched for a rom-com that Anyone But You was a hit.
She had Anyone But You, which was a hit, but then Madam Web flopped its dick off. She had a movie called Americana. Ever heard of it? She had this movie Reality, which I do think you're the only person who's ever seen it.
Reality winner, American Hero.
And then she had Christy that just came out, which also flopped.
I mean, I think it flopped harder than almost anything has flopped in recent history. And recent history has been floppy.
It's the 9th worst debut of all time for this many theaters.
Oof.
Anyway, then she comes out dating Scooter Braun. And I really went, oh my God, she thinks she's in her Reputation era. She really is like, well, if they're going to hate, let's team up. And I really went, well, this is a crazy move because not only are the Swifties a very powerful group, to start dating Taylor Swift's #1 enemy is preposterous, but he's also like the disgraced former manager of Ariana Grande, Justin Bieber, I mean, Carly Rae Jepsen for a while. But like, he is persona non grata across many of the fandoms.
I mean, people really don't like this guy across the board. And then they are doing these like staged paparazzi, like pap walks in Central Park where they look preposterous.
He has this tiny little loafer with a tiny little sock in it.
I've never seen a foot look so small. How does he stand upon them?
It's like a Lord Farquaad's feet. You look at the photo, it's them dressed up as if they're in When Harry Met Sally on a fall day in Central Park, and they're dressed up hugging on a rock, which you only go to if you're trying to copy Charlotte York's engagement photos for the New York Times. Like, it is a place where you go to signify couple and the coupliest photographs. And there they are. And you look at the photo and you go, wow, Sydney Sweeney has a really delicate, dainty little loafered foot. And then you go, oh my God.
Wait, she's wearing boots.
That's it's disgusting to look at. And then the GQ interview came out last week where she was given on a platter. A lot of people were upset that it seemed like your American Eagle ad was joking about white supremacy. And she refused to acknowledge it and then went on to say, and I quote, I think that when I have an issue that I want to speak about, people will hear. which means she hears that you believe that she's pro white supremacy, and she is actively choosing not to correct that opinion. So any benefit of the doubt that could have been offered to Sydney Sweeney, I believe has to be revoked because she has come out and said, I hear your accusation and I don't care enough to comment. And if you don't care that you're being called a white supremacist, that is akin.
Oh, God. Okay. So who is Sydney Sweeney? Where did she come from? Like, how did this happen?
So Sydney Sweeney is interesting to study. So I've read like 10 to 30 interviews with her. I've really been doing my research, and I'm interested because there is such a specific arc. And the thing about Sydney Sweeney is in the last 5 years, she's really blown up. So there's like an interview from every month of her career. And more than anyone else, you can see the initial faux pas, the immediate backlash, and then her immediate response within herself. Like you can see her personality. Like imagine some giant machine and like you press a button and all the little knobs start spinning and pulling inwards. Like you watch her get tighter and tighter and you can see the force field go up.
She's like adding processes. Like she's not saying like, oh, this was the mistake, let me address it. She's saying like in order to prevent any sort of backlash again, or in order to like not feel any sort of backlash again, I need to like change the entire way I approach the public.
Yeah, it's interesting. She's definitely somebody who goes into defense mode and protection mode as opposed to like self-reflection and growth mode. Which I will say, I do think it's tough when everybody's yelling at you and it's hard to figure out what's valid and what's not when the voices are just as loud every time.
Yeah.
The fun thing about Sydney Sweeney is there is a very specific lore that she loves about herself. And I think, you know, as all lore is, I'm sure it's mostly true, but I think a different person could have come up with a different story. But this is her truth. She grew up in a small town in Washington. It's funny because like you really see the journalistic integrity of pop culture journalism because sometimes they're like, she's from Idaho. Sometimes she's from Spokane. Sometimes she's from a small town that has like nobody living in it.
She's from like a general area on the Washington-Idaho border.
Yes. She grew up there. She comes from like a lower middle class background. Her mom was in fact a lawyer. And I guess she became a stay-at-home mom because it was just too tough to balance both. She has a little brother. Her dad is in hospitality. Something that people get wrong about her, even on Wikipedia, is that her dad is a doctor. He's not. I wonder if she said he's in hospitality, somebody heard he's in hospital, and they just ran with that.
That actually feels true.
That's what I've deduced. And she went on record and was like, I've emailed Wikipedia as myself being like, can you please change this? And she goes, I wish my dad was a doctor growing up, but he wasn't. And I do think it's upsetting to her specifically because something that's very important to her that you know is that she did not grow up wealthy. She grew up on the outskirts. She feels like an outsider. When she was 12 years old, an indie production came to town. She really wanted to audition. And this is key in the Sydney Sweeney lore. She went to her parents with a 5-year business plan about her becoming an actress. And they allowed her to audition. She got the role. And then by the time she was 13, they had moved to LA to allow her to pursue her dreams of being an actress.
Interesting. Okay. Obviously, we'll get to this later, but I feel like from what you've told me so far, she wants to be portrayed as like hardworking and like smart and whatever. But I feel like a lot of pieces of her story, because she is so specific with the way she speaks to the press, it feels like highlights from other successful versions of backstories we like the creating a business plan to convince your parents is Emma Stone. And I feel like every piece in her story, I'm like, oh, that's Jennifer Lawrence, that's Emma Stone.
Well, she's a great, and people give her credit for this, she's a great study of Hollywood. And what I think is very interesting about her, and then we'll get to my conclusion, is she's a brilliant study of the business of Hollywood, but not necessarily the stardom of Hollywood. And I think we're missing like this charisma. Like men love her because she has big boobs and she's never going to make you feel bad for seeing. Like she goes on record constantly saying, I never question the filmmakers I work with. I love all the filmmakers. I'm proud to show off my body. We'll get to it. There's a line in the GQ article where the woman goes, oh, you're wearing like a push-up bra. She goes, those are my real. Like she has a body. That's a tool. And it's a tool that'll make her rich.
Yeah.
And I do think she's a study of the business of it all. And I think she probably looked and said, what you need is a great backstory. So she also has a real chip on her shoulder about what she's overcome to become famous.
Yeah. And that also I want to say, like, I don't think her story isn't real. I'm just saying that I think she's picked the parts that she wants to highlight based on what she's seen work. Like she's saying, oh, this is something that worked.
Yes.
That people respond to positively. So I'm going to highlight that within my own story.
I also think, and this is something you've said to me in private conversations, is there's a real kind of like MAGA entitlement of no matter how rich you end up being or how quickly you get your success, if even for a moment you didn't have as much as you felt you deserved, There's a lot of resentment.
I feel like she just operates with such a chip on her shoulder that she deserves. Okay, this is going to get me in trouble, but it's almost like Swiftian in the way that if you've ever criticized, like there's no room for criticism. You can either appreciate her art, you can appreciate her, or you can shut the fuck up. If you have a problem, it's not your place to say.
Well, there's this weird, bizarre idea of the meritocracy in that, like, well, I worked harder than everyone I knew, so I should be more successful than anyone I've ever heard of.
Yes.
And if it's not happening exactly, then it's not fair. Okay, so anyway, back to the story. So the story is by 13, they had moved to LA. Because it was so expensive in LA, they lost their house in Washington for a while. There was a lot of problems. She talked about they lived in a motel room. They shared one room. Her and her mom shared the bed. Her brother and her dad shared the couch. And she's like, yeah, there was a lot of hardships. By the time I turned 18, she's like, I had $800 in my pocket and my parents had divorced and we had made a lot of sacrifices as a family for me to pursue this dream. And she even says as recently as 2023, like, I feel very guilty about that. Like, I feel like they all made sacrifices for me, so I have to make it work for them because of what they gave up. And the interviewer, Daniel Daddario, goes, oh, but do you feel like that's your fault they got divorced? And she goes, well, it depends on what fight I'm having with my parents. But sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. So there is a lot of pressure on her to make it. But I do wonder, like, why did you let your 13-year-old move? Like, why were you forcing your younger son to share a couch with his dad so that your other daughter could make, like, I don't know, like, you had a house and a job in Spokane.
And okay, so here's my issue with this whole story is that it is entirely a choice that did in fact pan out.
Yeah, you guys bet big, won big, so quit your complaining. That's what you thought would happen.
And I guess the thing is I don't care really that there was like 5 hard years in order to now be millionaire. Like she has several more than $1 million houses. And so I think that most people, if you said, would you have 5 hard years to spend the rest of your life living in a $13 million Miami mansion? They would say yes. Yeah. That is just like a very lucrative return on a tough investment, which was 5 hard years. And I think a lot of people have 5 hard years and then no $13 million mansion at the end of the road.
Okay, so here's also where I'm very confused because the other side of Sydney Sweeney, beyond the hard worker, lower middle class girl, is she's so smart. And I think I remember at one point people talked about how high her IQ was.
What the fuck is an IQ? I'm sick of that shit. Nobody has an IQ.
But you know, like that business plan is very much part of her lore. She's a girl who reads a lot. She is always like, I love when people underestimate me and I can show them that I'm so much better at that. She talks a lot about loving the business end of Hollywood. Of course, she's an executive producer on Anyone But You. She had her breakout roles in like 2018, 2019. By 2020, she had a production company. And here we are, 2025. She's already put out 3 movies. So like she worked quickly, but part of this lore is that she was even the valedictorian of her high school and she was going to college for business school. And I guess my question is, how were you the valedictorian of your high school in Washington State if your family was living in a 1-room motel in LA?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I feel like these are the things when I say like, you get to pick your own lore. I wonder if it's possible that they moved to LA for a pilot season.
Like if they were back and forth for a while.
Yeah. We were in a motel for a couple months while I did pilot season, which makes sense because if you already have a house somewhere, it is very expensive to then have a secondary pied-à-terre in LA. But that's not the story that's getting told of like, oh, my parents were willing to like be uncomfortable for a few months where I tried this thing out. It's very like, we were in a motel. And like even, you know, later she goes, even with 2 Emmy noms, she says her sense of being a Hollywood outsider remains. I had no idea getting into this industry how many people have connections. I started from ground zero. I know how fucking hard it is. Now I see how someone can just walk in a door and I'm like, wow, I worked my fucking ass off for 10 years for this. And it's beyond even just Hollywood nepotism. She talks about when they were filming The White Lotus, they were all secluded because it was during COVID on that 4 seasons. And at the end of filming, the hotel opened back up to regular clientele. And she said, it became clear that I did not belong among the clientele. I would go to breakfast in my sweatshirt and pajama shorts, then get the most disgusting glares from the guests that I dared to show up like that. So she really is obsessed with being like, I'm different than everybody. As Ashley said, so in 2023, she bought a $3 million LA home. In 2024, she bought a $9 million Bel Air mansion that she plans on flipping. And then later in 2024, she bought a $13 million house in Florida for her family to have as a vacation home. These interviews are from when she's 24, 25, 26. Oh, I'm sorry that you didn't get to buy $25 million worth of property until you were 25. Yeah, you have struggled harder than most people.
Yeah, and it is this weird thing where I agree it sucks, I think, to have worked hard, to have struggled, and then you are working with Nepo babies who haven't for a second even had to audition or whatever. You know what I mean? There is that thing that I understand a lot of people have a chip on their shoulder about, but for her, it seems to have overwhelmingly worked out. I think that this has started the wave that turned into a tidal wave against her, is that she has such a chip on her shoulder when she still has so much more than anyone reading the interview. Like, she has less than the people she's in a room with and more than anyone who's watching her stuff. And so it's hard to read when that's her angle the entire time. And then there's nothing to balance it out that's like charismatic and fun.
Yeah, so she's really private. And so it's funny, I read this interview from Chicago Splash, May 2019, which
Ooh, Splash.
I assume the reason she did it was because her boyfriend, then fiance, now ex-fiance, was living in Chicago. And she says, Chicago's such a beautiful city with the nicest people. I made more friends in the months I've been visiting here than the 5 years I've been in Los Angeles, says the Spokane, Washington native. I really appreciate the normalcy I can have here. And this is actually the only interview I could find, and way back in 2019, where she talks about having a boyfriend. Anything after this, she refuses to acknowledge him at all. She doesn't wear her engagement ring to interviews. And if you ask about her business production partner, who was her ex-fiance, she won't acknowledge anything about him. She just says, I like working with smart people. So 2019 was the last time she even acknowledged having a boyfriend publicly. And she says, I keep my private life private because I need to be separate from the characters, separate from my work, so I can feel like a human. Like, that very much is her defense mechanism. Like, I'll give them nothing. Mm-hmm. That way they can project whatever they want onto me, but I know it's not me. And that comes through a lot in the GQ interview, that her way of protecting herself is to give nothing, so that when people make assumptions about her, she knows that they're based on nothing.
I think that that is a fair way to proceed in Hollywood if you aren't courting what I believe she's courting, which is stardom. She's not trying to be a working actress. She is trying to be a movie star. And I do think that there is a difference. And I do think that what you have to give the public in order to achieve that level is different, because that is part of the job. It's two different jobs, actress and movie star.
Yes. And she wants to be like a brand ambassador. Anyway, yeah.
Yes. And so I think that, for her to sit here and be so resentful that people would even ask her the questions that you ask a movie star, then you have to go for a different job, which is working actress who is not the star. You are a best friend. You are a supporting actress. You just can't do both.
Or you have to be supremely talented.
But we were talking about this yesterday, and there are very few people who have found this footing in Hollywood where they can be a very successful revenue-driving actress and project creating actress that for no point in their career gave it to the public a little bit.
I was saying Rachel McAdams, for example, seems very private to me. And now she goes, not in her 20s. She was dating Ryan
Gosling, and she was straddling him on the stage for Best Kiss at the MTV Movie Awards. Yeah. And that was for the public. She was doing things to cement her place so that in her 30s and 40s, she could be private. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily right. I'm just saying it is what it is.
I also want to say, after this thing about how much she loves Chicago more than LA and how she made more friends there than in LA, she in 2023 says that she still thinks of Spokane as her home and tries to spend as much time as she can there. And that's her home more than LA. At this point, she, I guess, was in escrow on her second multi-million-dollar LA man. But you know what I mean? And I am also girl, you have to give it to her. She works her ass off. She's got 100 projects in the works at all times. I'm when are you even anywhere? It's so funny how important it is to her to let people know she does not see herself as an LA person. Mm-hmm. She's an outsider in LA, even though she is now one of LA's biggest stars.
So her first roles were 2019, right? 2020 is when she blew up.
Her breakout roles were in Sharp Objects on HBO and then also The Handmaid's Tale.
Okay.
And then also she was in this queer indie comedy called Everything Sucks. That was her first real role.
Okay.
I don't think that did huge stuff, but that kind of got her foot in the door. And then she was cast in White Lotus and Euphoria at the same time.
Okay.
And that's where things really blew up. Euphoria was the second most watched TV show on HBO after Game of Thrones. So then through Euphoria, she became huge. That's exactly when she turned around and made her production company. And that was in 2020. Now it's 2025 and here we are. Anything But You already came out last year.
Yeah.
She turned shit around quick.
And she has 5 movies coming out this year.
Mm-hmm. So in 2022, she says, I'm a very open person. I love to talk about everything, noting the fact that it eats at her that she can't open up about Madam Web. I eventually learned that she's preparing for the role with fight training, movement training, and something called Reformer Core Pilates. And that she was drawn to the film because she likes the personal struggles that the character goes through.
Something called Reformer Core Pilates. That's so 2022. What could Pilates be?
I just think what's important to me about this interview from the Hollywood Reporter in 2022 is that A, she says she's a very open person. I think anybody who saw the GQ article and anybody who's heard from her at all, she's an incredibly private person. And that's kind of always been true. But I wonder if here she didn't realize how private she was, or she hadn't felt comfortable admitting that she's a private person. But whatever it is, here she self-identifies as an open person to a press person, whereas later she's like obviously and openly private.
Okay.
And then I also think it's interesting that she's talking about how amazing Madame Web is. She's like, it's so different than what everyone else is in right now. Like, I think people are going to love it, which is interesting because then after Madame Web bombs, she says, I was just hired as an actress in it. So I was just along for the ride for whatever was going to happen.
Very different from her reformer core fight training.
Oh my God, you guys are going to love it. It's so different. Whereas Dakota Johnson's like, I always knew it sucked. And I do think something about Sydney Sweeney is if you ask her about any project she's ever been in, it was the most incredible experience. Everybody was amazing to work with. There's such incredible messaging and the struggles, and it's an important, like, she has those canned answers fucking down. So in 2023, she does this interview where she gets what I think is probably her first amount of like huge backlash. In it, she declines to comment on her relationship status. She doesn't wear a ring to the interview, even though she was seen wearing an engagement ring in paparazzi photos. She says here, if I wanted to take a 6-month break, I don't have income to cover that. I don't have someone supporting me. I don't have anyone I can turn to pay my bills or call for help. And they say, surely HBO paychecks afford a lifestyle immune to rising gas prices. They don't pay actors like they used to. And with streamers, you no longer get residuals. I have to pay 5% to my lawyers, 10% to my agents, 3% or something like that to my business manager. I have to pay my publicist every month, and that's more than my mortgage. It's not that she wants people to feel badly for her, but she is adamant that the luxuries of the job not gloss over the realities of the business. To stay relevant as a young actress, particularly one so deeply entrenched in and reliant on the internet generation, requires investment. There's a lot of press to do, and the associated costs, styling, tailoring, hair and makeup, travel aren't always covered by the network. She says that this is what motivated her to pivot into brand deals, taking gigs as a Miu Miu ambassador, starring in an Armani beauty campaign. If I just acted, I wouldn't be able to afford my life in LA. I take deals because I have to.
And the thing is, that's true, especially for that time in her life. When we read Anna Kendrick's book, she had this part of her life where she was promoting Up in the Air, which was nominated for Oscars. She was nominated for an Oscar, and she was still living in like a 3-bedroom apartment
with roommates and being like, hey, instead of putting me up at the Four Seasons, could you just give me the cash so I could pay rent? Because I can't really afford, because I can't work right now, my part-time job, to pay my rent. So I'm promoting this movie that didn't pay me anything.
Yeah. And I believe her. I mean, this is what the entire SAG strike was about, was that these streamers are able to pay like web series rates because they were initially classified as web series. And a lot of the people who weren't big names going into them, into these projects, were probably getting pretty bad deals. So when she was a nobody who signed on for The White Lotus, for Euphoria, for The Handmaid's Tale, like for all these projects, all on streamers in such a short amount of time, I'm sure she was much less rich than her level of fame. But I also think she was probably a lot more rich than most people. You know, we see this with influencers all the time, right? They'll be like, oh, I just wanted to order takeout, so I ordered this like fat box of sushi. Yeah. And you're like,
that was $180.
And that's your just like Sunday night takeout. And people have started thinking that that's like a normal lifestyle to achieve, and it isn't.
I also do think there is that time where if you're getting paparazzi'd and stuff, you do have to look a certain way. And it isn't. I mean, the maintenance on keeping your hair, skin, nails, clothes done, it is high. And I get that it is a business expense. But I mean, I think you see here that she doesn't know what's likable and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I find this quote very interesting too, because of the way she talks about pivoting into brand deals and how clearly that was not part of her initial quote unquote business plan, her 5-year business plan. But I think she clearly pivoted into it to like make the money. And I think the blowback she received from this interview, almost I can see the way it turned her gears and said, fuck it. If they're mad at me for making money, I'll just make the most money anyway. Like if nothing I do makes them happy, I'll just do whatever I can for the most money. And I feel like you start to see the beginning of it here.
Yeah. And I think that you see this with every controversy she's been a part of, that she gets more and more resentful that people would criticize her because she's trying her best. And here's another factor in it is, like you said, she's a very studied actress, like of Hollywood mechanisms. She's spent a lot of time like studying how to be successful in Hollywood, and you can see her following a specific blueprint. And I think that when it doesn't work out the way she thought it would, like when her plans aren't panning out exactly as she expected, she becomes very resentful of the people that threw it off track, the audience, the interviewer, whoever. And I think that a lot of it is partially that she's pissed that you're mad at her. But even more so, she's pissed that you're not like reacting the way you're supposed to. Like you're not doing your role.
Yes.
Which is adoration of her.
But it's just so interesting because like, so in this interview, she also says, while fame has expanded her awareness of the way the world works, it's having a chilling effect on her personal life. I can feel my bubble of who I can talk to and share intimate things with and have relationships with shrinking. That is so different than what she says in GQ, where she goes, I have no idea what's going on with my fame. She says to the GQ interviewer last week, I don't feel any of my fame except for when I turn on my phone. I have the same group of friends I've always had. I'm very grounded. I go home to Spokane. I turn off my phone.
I'm just Sid. Wait, I had to do my impression of it.
Yeah. Ashley has an impression she's been working on.
Yeah, hold on. The key to sounding like Sydney Sweeney is having a tiny bit of water in your mouth. I'm just Sid.
I'm just Sid.
You didn't have any water in your mouth.
I know. Anyway, she's done being honest. And I went up and I watched that video that came out years ago that's been resurfacing where she goes on her live and she's like, when you say these mean things, it hurts people. You have to stop being mean. And even there, she says, I would never come on here crying about this, but I have to let you guys know that when you say something mean, it hurts. And so I guess that's always been in her. She has an awareness, like, don't ever let them see you cry, but she used to not be as good about it as she is now.
Yeah.
2023, she admits to Variety, sometimes I feel beat up about it. It's hard to sit back and watch and not be able to stand up for yourself about the hate she gets online. And so here she's still being a bit honest, a bit vulnerable. And she also addresses one of the controversies was that her mom had a 60th birthday party where people were dressed in MAGA clothes and she got a lot of hate for it. I thought she didn't comment publicly about it really, but apparently to them she said, Sweeney, unprompted, brings up that her father wasn't at the birthday party, an event she threw for her mom's 60th in 2022 that drew social media opprobrium. Photos of the celebration showed guests in what appeared to be Blue Lives Matter garb and MAGA-styled red caps, later revealed to read, Make 60s Great Again. There were so many misinterpretations, she says. The people in the pictures weren't even my family. The people who brought the things that people were upset about were actually my mom's friends from LA who have kids that are walking outside in the Pride Parade. And they thought it would be funny to wear things because they were coming to Idaho.
I guess I feel that people who are adamantly against what's happening with Trump wouldn't wear it as a joke either.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that the people wearing Trump stuff at her mom's birthday party were doing it ironically, but I do
believe they had kids that were walking in pride parades.
I do find it interesting that here, unprovoked, she defends herself and her family, and she's upset about it. So then, of course, there's the whole situation in terms of publicity because she's such a private person who claims to like not be on her phone, not care about the social media of it all. But obviously, she's very business savvy. So it's interesting because if you guys recall, when they were filming Anyone But You down in Australia, there was such an uproar because it seemed like Glenn and Sydney were getting close together. Ultimately, Glenn broke up with his girlfriend or she broke up with him over it. And then there was rumors that her and her fiance were breaking up.
Which ultimately did happen.
Yeah. But contrary to this like persona she's put out as a girl who just like never checks her phone and doesn't care what they say, in a media environment that's outside even a gifted actor's control, there can be a certain pleasure in leaning into the narrative. They want it, Sweeney says. It's fun to give it to them. So that was all in 2023, around the Anyone But You, around Madam Web. And then, of course, Madam Web bombs. And then, of course, something called Eden came out and bombed. I mean, she has just been in bomb. So then, of course, we have, as I've already said, the Jeff Bezos wedding, which seems to align herself publicly and personally with the moneyed ruling class that she felt so on the outside of. You know what I mean? She starts off, she goes, I can't even eat breakfast at a Four Seasons hotel because everybody thinks I'm such an outsider freak, to she is at the most expensive wedding of all time, aligning herself not with other actors and contemporaries, but with producers, the head of the company. And then she puts out this Sasquatch ad, which is, she loves being taken seriously. She wants people to know she's a good actress. She uses her body as a tool. Here she is absolutely just like selling herself to the horned up dog men. And then she does this American Eagle jeans.
The horned up dog men. No, exactly.
And she won't speak on it. Somebody who does try to be like, oh, I care about domestic violence. Like I use my art to show my values, but yet refuses to acknowledge. So here she is. First, she's being asked, a big thing that happened to you this year is that you ended your engagement. You're a private person. Your ex-fiance is a private person. So for a lot of us in the media, it was really surprising how much of a news story that was. Did you sense your own fame change this year? And she says, no, I surround myself with a really, really strong group of people who have been in my life since I was little. And they take me out of Hollywood, take me out of this bubble and remind me what the real world is. And that's where I exist. And so the aspect and the idea of fame, it doesn't apply to my personal life. I'm just Sid. Say it.
I don't have my water.
Got your water. Your water's right there.
I'm just Sid.
I'm just Sid and I don't run in that world, which is obviously like an interesting departure from who she used to be somebody who struggled with it and her circle's getting smaller. Clearly, she's just like, of course, her fame has gotten huge and obviously it's impacted her. This idea that she just turns off her phone and ignores it is not true, but this is the facade she's going with. She's fully committed to having like a fake persona that doesn't care.
And something that's so interesting about this GQ interview that we haven't really mentioned yet, but obviously, you know, if you've watched it, is that this wall that she's built up feels almost physically present at the GQ interview. She is so separate, body language, you know, cadence, everything about her presence in this interview is closed.
Yeah.
She's so away from the interviewer. And something that I want to talk about that I find so interesting about this backlash to the GQ interview is the way people were upset with the interviewer and the way that people felt the interviewer should have pushed her more. You see, you know, minutes and minutes go by of the interviewer trying and failing to connect. You see a bizarre moment at the beginning of the interview where the interviewer is kind of resigned to being like, I am not going to get much. She tries to kind of joke around and laugh a little bit. And then you see her face change where she realizes this is going to not be a fun and flirty interview. I'm going to be trying to yank whatever I can.
I think by asking 3 separate times and in 3 separate ways and in ways that she kept cleaning it up and cleaning up, and she got as close to as possible to just saying, and so do you disavow white supremacy? And Sydney won't engage, and I think that's the answer we're looking for.
Exactly.
If you don't care enough, if somebody says people think you're a white supremacist and you go, well, I don't care what they think.
Yeah. And what I found so interesting is the way people were saying, you know, she should have pushed, she should have pushed. I think asking 3 times is what I would call pushing. And then you have to ask, like, what do you want from her? Like, do you want things to become genuinely contentious? Because she is there to interview on behalf of GQ magazine for a cover story. Yeah. In the era of Alex Cooper style interviews, there is not actually a ton of room to really push on more controversial topics because celebrities have become very comfortable in a space where in order to get major publicity, they can just go on Therapist with Jake Shane and have him say, I love you when you dive into the water in front of the Sydney Opera House and anyone but you. That's so funny. And so to have an interviewer asking a couple of times this question, like that is what pushing is. Like, do you want her to say fuck you and storm off? Because then she's not getting the interview. She is still a person with a job.
Yeah. And also I do think she gives the audience enough to draw a conclusion.
Yeah.
She didn't just say it once and walk away. She said it 3 separate times.
And she didn't say it ambiguously.
And here's something that I missed when I watched the video. I don't know if it was in the video, but it was in the written part that I find so interesting. And it's kind of the summation of my beliefs about Sydney Sweeney. The interviewer says, by some reports, American Eagle's stock price went up 38%. Does that make it less painful to be at the center of that much conversation if you know it really worked for the business that you're partnering with? I was aware of the numbers as it was going. So when I saw all the headlines of in-store visits were down a certain percentage, none of it was true. It was all made up and nobody could say anything because the company was in their quiet period. So it was all just a lot of talk. And because I knew at the end of the day what the ad was for and it was great jeans, it didn't affect me one way or the other.
In that interview, when the interviewer says, did you expect it to go so viral? She goes, I did a jeans ad. I wear jeans. I'm wearing jeans right now. Like, I love jeans. It's patronizing to the audience to have looked into an ad as anything beyond the surface is a choice.
Later in the interviewer talks about a scene in the, the housemaid or the
one with Amanda Seyfried.
And she goes, you're sitting in this theater room and you're wearing a push-up bra. And she goes, those are my real boobs. And the interviewer goes, oh, fact-checked in real time. It's interesting. She'll stand up for her own boobs. She'll be like, no, I have huge boobs with or without a push-up bra. That's just my like regular boobs. Like that's where she'll stop and like correct
the narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, she said when there's something that she wants to speak out on, she'll speak out about it.
Yeah. And so what she's worried about is that, you know, she is as hot as you think she is. And that it's interesting that she's like comforted by the fact that ultimately it was a successful business ad that the American Eagle has said they'll team with her again. She is somebody who believes she's in her villain arc, doesn't care about anything but making money. She doesn't care if the movie's bombed. I know she just said that she does with Christy, but that's not true, I don't think. I think ultimately she wants to make a lot of money. She wants to be the owner. I wouldn't be surprised if she gave up acting altogether. I think she is somebody who wanted to be successful and rich, and she was going to be successful and rich at anything she chose. She just so happened to choose something at 12 that she feels married to. And I'm absolutely sure the Scooter Braun thing is PR. Yeah. She is such a private person. She's been recently photographed with her own ex-fiance getting dinner. I don't think Scooter Braun is okay with you getting dinner with your ex-fiance. Like, It's just such an obvious PR stunt. And it's interesting for a woman who stays so private to be like, what I want people to publicly think about me is bad. I feel like she is somebody who feels very put upon, and to not care that you're being thought of white supremacist as long as the money is there is an indictment on who she is. And it's interesting. She's just like, I don't care. She's going for the money.
Yeah, and you really see her refusing to at all acknowledge any valid criticisms because there have been invalid criticisms. And you see this all the time with very famous people or even medium famous people. I saw it when I worked for Leandra Medine, who founded Man Repeller. When she would get a wave of criticism, she was very incapable of processing any of it because there was invalid criticism lumped in with the very valid criticism. She didn't know how to parse through it. And that is hard, but I do think it's pretty crucial when you're in the public eye, because why would you know everything? So you either have to be able to sort through your own criticism, or you have to build a team that can sort through the criticism for you and help you from there.
Or you could go right.
Or you can go right
and just be like, well, then I don't care about anybody. I don't care about offending anybody. I don't care about anything besides making money. But I guess the interesting thing to see with Sydney Sweeney will be, does this long-term bet pay off for her? Because clearly she's still one of the hottest young stars in America. Will these right-wing gooners be gooning to her in theaters? There's a huge market on that side of the aisle, and yet are those the people going to theaters supporting the thing that she claims to care a lot about, which is like the craft of acting?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, because I think that Hollywood itself is very split right now. Hollywood is built off of people who are in the arts, who care about people and who care about messaging and who care about like what they're putting out into the world. On one hand, you have the Zendayas, who there is a blind item right now that Zendaya will not work with Sydney Sweeney at all for Euphoria promotion. They've filmed season 3. They're going to be promoting it soon.
I do also want to caveat that I looked into that rumor. It has not yet been substantiated by anybody, and it's all coming from Daily Mail, which is a publication that often comes for Black women, especially in entertainment. And I think it's important for us to remember that whereas I think with us and our values, we go, oh, kudos to Zendaya for standing up for what she believes in.
Oh, it's like a diss. They're making up a bad story about Zendaya.
Yeah, they think they're hurting her by being like, look how petty and stupid the left is. Like, poor baby, big boobed Sydney Sweeney does a jeans ad and Zendaya won't even work with her now. So I do think it's important to know that we don't know if that's true. And it's also not necessarily in her benefit.
But I also think we'll find out.
Yeah. When they start doing press.
I think that'll be interesting to see.
There's also rumors of her and Zendaya having beef because Sydney was caught liking thirst traps of Tom Holland.
Okay.
Years ago on Twitter.
Hilarious.
And I will say, I'm is that even her type? She seems to an old uggo.
Yeah.
She loves an old uggo, which is something I've heard actually from somebody who knew her, that she as a teenager in Hollywood knew how to walk into a room and find the oldest, most powerful man in the room. And even if it was a birthday party, she was which dad is most important? Her superpower.
Very powerful.
Well, more powerful than whatever the fuck we got going on.
No, I meant that earnestly. That's very powerful. Anyway, I guess it's interesting because there are people in Hollywood who I do believe this matters to them. And then there are also the people who are in charge of Hollywood, the studios, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, who are buying out more studios, who prefer a white supremacist. So, obviously, in my world where I'm yay, Zendaya, I love this blind item about you. This is a good thing. There is the equal and opposite, way more money having world where it's not a good thing.
Anyway, so TLDR or even TLDL, too long didn't listen. It does seem that Sydney Sweeney in the past 5 to 6 years has taken her fame and decided that her new public persona is going to be shut out the world, pretend I don't care, pretend I haven't heard it, and go for gold. Bricks of gold.
It's a villain era. And what will the next era bring? Could be anything. Because I do think that we are culturally goldfish. I see there being a version of Sydney Sweeney in 5 years. I don't mean a good thing, but it could be just a completely different thing. And then there will be people on the internet saying, are we just forgetting this? And then there'll be someone responding to them on the internet saying, can't we just leave women alone?
Yeah. It takes one fun dive bar dancing video for everybody to change their tune.
I mean, she could adopt a puppy and everything's different.